After a pretty low-key season premiere, Episode 2 of For All Mankind's 5th season starts to kick things into gear. You've got some kind of conspiracy brewing, a mission to Saturn in the offing, and what may be the show's biggest goodbye to date. So let's suit up and take a look at the latest developments in Happy Valley. One of the fun things about For All Mankind is how you can trace its lineage back through some of the landmark sci-fi series of the past few decades. Series co-creator Ronald D. Moore cut his teeth on Star Trek The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine before going on to create the 2004 reboot of Battlestar Galactica. If you keep an eye on the credits, you'll notice a lot of behind-the-scenes names from those earlier series popping up on For All Mankind, including the writing team of David Weddle and Bradley Thompson. They got their start on DS9, and they were heavily involved in Battlestar Galactica. And if there's one thing they love to do, it's roll the hard six.
Sometimes you have to roll the hard six.
Sometimes you gotta roll the hard six.
Sometimes you gotta roll the hard six.
What does that mean, sir?
I don't know. It's something my dad says.
We spent almost the entire episode on Mars this time, with one quick cut to Alita back on Earth. Mostly, we're focused on the fallout from Lee Jung Gil's arrest. Because he's in Happy Valley under an asylum claim, he's not protected by the charter that guarantees legal residents a hearing on Mars before being extradited to Earth. And being sent back to Earth is a very bad thing if your government has a grudge against you, as turned out to be the case for Svetlana Zakharova, who we learned supposedly committed suicide shortly after being sent to Earth for trial last season. In the last episode, I'd speculated that Lee was being set up by North Korean intelligence, but it sure looks like it was actually the Soviet aerospace company Kuragin, which we find out is taking clandestine deliveries of something from somebody in the middle of the night. Kuragin has been lurking in the background of For All Mankind for a while now. In the Another Giant Leap videos between seasons 2 and 3, Kuragin is introduced as a private enterprise made possible by Mikhail Gorbachev's liberalization of the Soviet economy, partnering with Roscosmos to mine helium-3 on the moon and build Russia's fleet of space shuttles. More recently, they edged out Helios for the contract to build the Martian space elevator, which Devayesa sees as part of a larger move by the M6 to push him out of Mars entirely. And after Gorbachev was deposed in last season's coup, it seems like a safe bet that Kuragin is more an arm of the Soviet government than an independent operator. Whatever they're up to, they seem suspiciously unconcerned when Mars Peacekeeper Celia Boyd questions them about these late-night shipments. So far, Celia is giving off very strong, honest cop who gets too close to the truth vibes, which is usually very bad news for the cop. Traditionally, the way this kind of story goes is that the honest cop goes to their superior with the evidence they've gathered, the superior thanks them for all their great work and asks if they've told anybody else about it, and then promptly murders them to keep the secret from getting out. My first thought was that this corrupt superior would turn out to be Sheriff Palmer James. There was something about the way he made a point of giving Celia credit for uncovering the murder in the previous episode that really raised my suspicions. But the more I think about it, the less I think that's right. Palmer's not above blackmailing Miles to get information on what the colonists are planning in response to Lee's arrest, but everything we've seen about him suggests he's sincerely invested in the larger Mars mission. In Season 4, when he tells Danielle Poole about the tremor in Ed's hand, he prefaces it with a speech about how much Ed and the space program have meant to him. The importance he puts on honor and doing the right thing seems genuine, which makes it hard to believe that he'd go so far as to cover up a murder. The Mars Peacekeepers as an institution are another story. According to the Next Giant Leap videos from this season, they were created in the wake of congressional hearings into CIA abuses on Mars during Season 4. It's interesting how For All Mankind has repurposed bits of 21st century history now that its timeline has diverged so drastically from ours. Those CIA hearings were clearly modeled on the hearings into abuses at the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, and the parallels become even more obvious when we learn that Paul Bremer, who in our world was the administrator of the US occupation in Iraq, served as the first governor of Mars. More importantly, we learn that the Peacekeepers have mostly been recruited from Earth, which suggests that their loyalty may lie with whatever political machinations are going on back home. So if I had to pick the person in authority most likely to be secretly orchestrating this cover-up, right now I'd go with Governor Lenya Polivanov, who really shows the sharp teeth under his amiable affect in his meeting with Ed. Want to know how this episode ends? It sure plays like a farewell to Ed Baldwin. It's a quintessential Ed Baldwin story. He's decided what the right thing to do is, and his first move is to try to browbeat the higher-ups into doing it. And when that doesn't work, he decides he's going to do it anyway. We've seen him do this again and again throughout the series, from diverting Apollo 15 from its original landing site to attempting to rescue the Soviet Mars mission against Dev's orders. This time, he orchestrates a heist to snatch Lee before he can be transferred to the Phoenix and deliver him to the colony of independent spacefaring nations. After a fairly sleepy and dour premiere episode, the chase sequence between Ed and the Peacekeepers is a lot of fun, and it finally gets this season's blood pumping. Throughout the episode, we get reminders of the many pivotal events that Ed has been a part of. In his conversation with the governor, they rehash the events of the first Mars mission and last season's riot. Later, Ed brings up the Apollo 10 mission that's been his formative regret going all the way back to the very first episode. It feels very much like the sort of retrospective that TV characters often get right before they're about to leave the series. So I think there's a decent possibility that Ed really does die at the end of this episode. Once the 6th and final season was announced, I'd started to think that they were going to keep him around to the end in order to provide some connective thread to the beginning of the series. And that may still well turn out to be the case, but it would make a lot of sense to write him out now. They made a big point in the previous episode that attempting to fly again would very likely kill him, and after what he does in this episode, it would really strain credibility if he were still allowed to roam freely around the base. He's totally disconnected from the formal power structure of Happy Valley at this point, and even his personal relationship with Dev doesn't give him any real clout. And frankly, he's just old. If he somehow manages to survive both this and his cancer diagnosis, he'd likely be in his mid-90s in Season 6, and it's hard to see how he could have much of an active role in the plot at that point. Killing Ed now would allow him to go out in the most Ed Baldwin way possible, avoiding the fate that he told Kelly he feared the most in Season 4 by literally dying in the cockpit. It would also provide a lot of motivation for Alex to really take up the Free Mars cause, if his last conversation with Ed ends up being the one where he's chided for not taking anything seriously. It might spur Miles Dale to action as well. But I'm not sure how I'd feel about it for all mankind without Ed Baldwin. The show has already changed so drastically that losing Ed as an anchor point would feel like a final break with what's come before. It's about the hardest 6 this show could roll, and I'm not entirely confident that the series would be able to keep me invested in the story without him. If there's one thing that could do it, it's the mission to Titan. They teased in the last episode that Helios had some probes out near Saturn, and now it looks like we're actually going to go out there with Kelly Baldwin. We also know that Kuragin has its own probes in the area, which could allow that storyline to link up with whatever they're up to in Happy Valley. But after more than a season and a half focused on Mars, I can't wait for this show to get back out into outer space, because that's where it really shines. I can respect the world building they're doing in Happy Valley, and the conspiracy theory they're setting up for this season is starting to get more intriguing. But the heart of For All Mankind has always been exploration, and it's high time that they started pushing the edges of the frontier again. So here's hoping we won't have to wait long. Thanks as always for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you back here next time.